A long time ago, in a quiet village called Nuru, surrounded by forest and hills, there lived a girl named Imani. Everyone in Nuru knew her name. She was unlike anyone they had ever known. Her beauty was breathtaking, her skin smooth like river stones, her eyes bright like stars reflected in still water. People would pause just to watch her walk. Her presence made even the most confident men nervous. But it wasn't just beauty that made Imani unforgettable. It was the fear she evoked. She wasn't loud. She didn't boast. But every man in Nuru knew better than to approach her. Imani didn't smile or joke like the other village girls. Her face was always serious, her voice cold and sharp. And if a man dared to get too close or speak too sweetly, Imani didn't hesitate, she would strike. Hard. There were many tales of her fury. Keto, the baker's son, once brushed against her elbow in the market. She slapped him so hard he stumbled into a stack of yam baskets. The villagers whispered. Musa, the carpenter's apprentice, tried to compliment her eyes. He ended up with a bruised lip and a black eye. Even the sons of elders, young men raised with pride and honor, learned the hard way not to test her. Still, some were drawn to her, believing they could change her heart. They brought her gifts, beads, honeycomb, palm wine, even golden rings. Imani would not take a single offering. The few who tried to place items in her hand received that same hand in the form of a slap. Over time, the men in the village learned to keep their distance. But the mystery of her rage grew. Why was Imani so angry? What had turned her heart so hard? The village women sometimes pitied her. They would watch her walk alone and say to each other, "Such beauty. Such sorrow." One day, Imani went to the market to buy cassava and red pepper. It was a warm afternoon. The village was buzzing with people. She walked quietly through the crowd, picking vegetables with calm precision. Just as she reached for a bag of millet, a young man, distracted by his friends, bumped into her from behind. Before he could apologize, Imani spun and slapped him across the face. The sound was so loud it brought the market to a sudden halt. Everyone turned. The man staggered, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. "I'm sorry," he cried, backing away. Imani didn't speak. She picked up her millet and walked away. The market slowly returned to its rhythm, but now with hushed whispers. "She struck another," someone said. "He didn't even mean it," said another. "She is dangerous," someone else whispered. The rumors spread quickly. And with them, the fear of Imani grew stronger. Despite her actions, many still admired her. There was something captivating about her strength. Some men still thought they could be the one to melt her heart. Others wanted to conquer her as if she were a mountain to be climbed. One bold young man named Obesai believed his charm would succeed where others had failed. He had a confident smile, a wealthy father, and a collection of fine clothes. He walked into Imani's compound with a necklace made of gold beads. "You are too beautiful to be alone," he said, trying to place the necklace around her neck. Imani looked at him once. Then she struck him so hard across the mouth that two of his teeth flew into the grass. Obesai crawled away, crying and humiliated. His father, one of the village elders, wanted to confront Imani. But when he remembered the stories, he held his tongue. The elders began to worry. "We must speak with her," they said. "This cannot go on." So they sent word to Imani, asking her to come to the village square. The next morning, she arrived in her simple blue wrap, her head held high. The village had gathered. Men, women, even children came to see what would happen. Imani stood before the elders, arms folded. "Imani," said Elder Jabari, "we respect your strength. But we are troubled by your anger. Why do you beat every man who comes near you? I do not beat every man, Imani said calmly. Only those who forget I am not theirs to touch. The crowd murmured. Why do you carry such hatred? Another elder asked. Imani's eyes narrowed. I carry no hatred. I carry memory. What memory? The elder asked. But Imani said nothing more. She turned and walked away. The elders were left with silence. The villagers were left with more questions. A week later, Imani walked to the river to fetch water. The sun was high. The path was dry and cracked. As she stepped over a stone, her ankle twisted. She cried out and fell, her pot breaking beside her. Blood trickled from her foot. A young farmer named Kazi, nearby collecting herbs, saw her fall. He rushed over, kneeling. You're hurt, he said. Let me help. He reached for her foot. Imani's fist struck his jaw with the strength of a falling tree. Kazi rolled back, stunned. I was only trying to help, he whispered. Imani stood slowly. I never asked for your help. She limped away, leaving him holding his bruised face. The story spread again. She struck Kazi, people said. Even when he offered kindness. By now, fear of Imani had turned to legend. But her story had also reached the ears of someone powerful, Prince Isle. Prince Isle had heard many tales, of Imani's beauty, her rage, and her silence. Instead of being afraid, he was intrigued. She is not broken, he said. She is guarding something. And so, one morning, the prince dressed simply, without royal robes, and visited Imani. He brought no gifts, only stories. He sat outside her home and told her about the distant lands he had seen, the markets of the east, the rainforests of the south. Imani said nothing. But she listened. He returned the next day, and the next. Weeks passed. Slowly, Imani began to speak. She asked questions. She shared small thoughts. And then one day, Prince Isle invited her to walk by the river. The air was cool and the path soft with early dew. Imani agreed. They walked quietly at first, side by side. Birds sang in the trees, and the water murmured softly beside them. Prince Isle smiled. I have never met anyone like you, he said. Imani did not reply. Her gaze stayed on the horizon. Encouraged by her silence, Isle reached for her hand. That was when everything changed. Imani's eyes widened, her chest tightening. The world around her seemed to collapse into a single memory, screams in the dark, the thud of fists on flesh, her mother's voice begging. Without thinking, Imani's body reacted. She spun and struck the prince in the chest with all her strength. Isle stumbled back, shocked. Before he could speak, another blow landed, across his face, then his side. He fell to the ground, gasping. His guards, startled and confused, rushed to lift him. Are you all right, Your Highness? He nodded faintly, his mouth bloody and one eye already swelling. Don't hurt her, he whispered. Imani had already walked away. Word spread like wildfire through the village. Imani had struck the prince. The prince! People gasped, gathered, and speculated. Some were furious, others in awe. The chief summoned an emergency meeting. Even the elders were uncertain. What punishment would come? Imani was summoned to the palace. She came alone, as always, walking calmly through the gates where hundreds had gathered to watch. Her head was held high, her gaze unwavering. Inside the courtyard, the king sat upon his golden stool, flanked by his advisors, his face like carved stone. You dare strike my son? The king's voice boomed. Explain yourself. Imani stood silently. Speak, or I will speak judgment upon you, he warned. Still, Imani said nothing. The prince, bruised and quiet, stepped forward. Father, she. But the king raised a hand. Let her answer. At last, Imani drew a breath. Her voice was low, but strong. I did what I've always done, she said. I defended myself. You were on a peaceful walk, the king said. My son reached for your hand. What danger was there? You ask what danger? Imani said, her voice trembling now. Let me tell you. The crowd hushed. My father was strong. His hands were rough and cruel. My mother, she was gentle. She smiled at everyone, even when her face was bruised. I was a child, watching him hurt her day after day. Her voice wavered, but she continued. One night, he beat her while she was pregnant. She screamed, he kept hitting her. I tried to stop him, but he pushed me aside. She lost the baby. Then she died. And he drank palm wine and slept. Gasps echoed. When he finally passed away, I thought I would be safe. But I was sent to my uncles. They were no different. They beat their wives. They brought women to the house and treated them like animals. No one spoke. No one helped. And I learned silence doesn't protect you. Tears streamed down her face. So I made a vow. I would never let a man raise his hand to me. I would never let a man own me with words or gifts or touches. I became the protector my mother never had. The king was silent. The villagers, too, held their breath. Prince Isle stepped forward again. She struck me, but she also protected something sacred to her. I was wrong to assume I had the right to touch her without truly knowing her story. The king looked at his son, then at Imani. You are fierce, he said. But now, we understand why. He stood. From this day forth, no man shall raise his hand to a woman in Nuru without consequence. Let your pain become our change. The crowd erupted in quiet, tearful applause. Women nodded. Men looked down, reflecting. Imani bowed her head. In the days that followed Imani's powerful revelation in the palace courtyard, the village of Nuru began to change. The king's declaration rippled across the land like a cleansing rain. Men who had once laughed at women's pain now lowered their heads with shame. Husbands returned home quietly, their tempers softened. Sons listened more carefully to their mothers. A long-needed silence had been broken, and Imani was its voice. The women of Nuru stood taller. They looked at Imani not with fear, but with admiration. They began to gather in circles and share their own stories. Some had cried alone for years. Now, they found comfort in each other. A quiet revolution had begun, not with fire or swords, but with truth. Prince Isle, still nursing the wounds from that fateful day, returned to Imani's compound. He carried no gifts. No guards. Only a small calabash filled with healing herbs. I came to listen, he said softly. If you'll let me. Imani said nothing at first. But she did not close the door. She allowed him to sit on the small wooden stool beside the baobab tree in her courtyard. They sat for a long time, saying little. Birds chirped above them. Children played in the distance. It was the first silence that didn't feel heavy between them. Days passed. Then weeks. The prince visited regularly. Not to court, not to flatter, but to learn. He asked about her mother, her past, her dreams. Imani spoke slowly, cautiously, but each word she shared seemed to lift a small stone off her chest. One morning, As dawn broke over Nuru, Isle brought her a gift, unlike any he had offered before. It was not jewelry or clothing. It was a scroll. Inside, laws written and sealed by the king himself. No man shall force himself upon a woman. No man shall strike a woman without punishment. Any man found abusing his wife or daughters shall be judged before the elders. Women shall be allowed to speak freely in gatherings of leadership. Imani read the scroll with trembling hands. She looked at Isle. You did this? He nodded. We did this. You led. I followed. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness, but from something she had almost forgotten, hope. In time, Imani began to walk freely through the market again. But this time, she was no longer followed by fear or silence. People greeted her with respect. Women offered smiles. Children waved. The girl once feared was now honored. Eventually, Prince Isle knelt before her. Not in a grand ceremony. Not before a crowd. Just the two of them, beneath the old tree. I will never own you, he said. I do not ask you to belong to me. I ask if you would walk beside me, as my equal, my partner, my strength. Imani, for the first time in her life, smiled fully. It wasn't a mask. It wasn't polite. It was real. I will walk with you, she said, but not because I was conquered. Because I was seen. Their wedding was quiet but sacred. It was not a celebration of power or possession. It was a union of mutual respect. The whole village came, not just to witness a royal marriage, but to celebrate a girl who had become a symbol of strength. Under new laws, women began to thrive in Nuru. Girls who once feared marriage grew up knowing they had a voice. Mothers taught their daughters to speak, not just to obey. Fathers taught their sons that love is not dominance, but devotion. As for Imani, she continued to serve, not as queen in the palace, but as a leader of the people. She helped create shelters for women who had suffered as she had. She hosted gatherings where young girls could speak their minds. She traveled to nearby villages, sharing her story, inspiring change. And the prince, true to his word, remained by her side, not in front, not behind, but beside. Years passed. Imani's name was sung in lullabies and carved into the walls of schools and healing centers. Children learned her story not as a cautionary tale, but as a legacy of strength. In the twilight of her years, when her hair had streaks of silver and her voice had grown softer but no less wise, she stood once more in the village square. A crowd gathered, young and old, men and women. My mother died in silence, she told them. But I chose not to. I chose to speak, not just with words, but with the courage to say, no more. She looked at the young girls in the crowd. You are not weak. You are not less. You are powerful. And you are enough. The crowd erupted in applause, not out of politeness, but from hearts deeply moved. That night, under a sky filled with stars, Imani and Isle sat beside one another in the courtyard where their journey had begun. I used to think I was alone, Imani whispered. You never were, Isle said, taking her hand. And for the first time, truly and completely, she believed him.